Good afternoon again, Tony Walker here, and we're going to begin looking at a paper that I spoke about in the introductory video to this YouTube playlist series on a biblical theology of technology. Now, if you haven't had a chance to watch video number 1 in more or less words, I wrote a paper recently for a college class that I'm taking, and in that paper, I took two things that I love, the Bible and technology, and tried to form them together and look at technology from a biblical perspective. And so what I want to do over these videos is just look at a piece of that paper, each video on the YouTube series, and just go through it together and see if anyone has any questions or comments that can help me develop it. Now, in the beginning of the paper, this is how I opened it up. In the late 90s, I destroyed my first computer. I'm not exactly sure what I did to it, but I know that taking it apart and putting it back together did not fix the little blinking cursor on an otherwise blank screen. A few years prior to that, I saw for the first time a computer play a video from a disk. I was in elementary school. The teacher took a disk, this little shiny object, put it into a computer, and there on the screen was someone catching a football. Amazing. Now, the marvel of technology in my own bedroom that had a CD-ROM, a file folder structure, a program for restitching MIDI files too large for a single 1.44 megabyte floppy disk was dead. I'd recently been adopted into a better living situation by older parents who thought a computer would benefit me. Side note, you can go back and look at a video I made a few years ago. Probably says March 22nd in the title somewhere, about when my mother was murdered and I was adopted by my babysitters. So taken into this family very shortly after that in a better living situation, they bought a computer and they thought that it would benefit me. But they sure didn't know how to fix the computer that I destroyed, and I slightly suspect they wouldn't even have known how to turn it on. A computer repairman in town said that the computer was done, and thus began my fascination with technology. Later after that, we went to a store. Some of you, if you're watching this video because of the technology and maybe not the theology, you'll remember a store called Circuit City. So we went to Circuit City and we bought a newer model computer. This one had something called the internet, something I'd never had before. We signed a plan with CompuServe, and I picked out my first email address. It contained 23 as an homage to Michael Jordan. And as a kid takes off the training wheels when learning to balance, I soon after bought a Windows XP Home Edition upgrade disk and felt unleashed. I still remember the excitement when I upgraded the operating system for the first time on a computer. We later upgraded from a dial-up connection to 1 megabyte cable internet with Charter. And I can still visualize how the charter.msn.com homepage loaded what seems like it was almost instantaneously. Over the years, I returned to Circuit City and purchased more of these amazing tools. For example, a Sony Clie personal digital assistant, a USB thumb drive that held an enormous 128 megabytes for only $149. What a deal. And later, a digital camcorder. All was well until I was invited to an event at a local school in my area, BJU. There on display in the bookstore was not a regular PC, but it was an Apple iMac G4. Those of you who are familiar with that, you know the design behind that computer, which I said is still one of the most iconic and masterfully designed computers ever made, and I'm not alone in that. Thus began my fascination with Apple technology. Question: where was God in all of this? At that point, I'd been a Christian for less than 2 years. It was the fall of 2002, and I was taking night classes at a small Bible college in Greenville, South Carolina, and working third shift at a company called Ryobi. Many of you maybe have heard of that more recently years, called TTI, Tektronix Industries. But they're going to Bible college in Greenville and working full-time third shift at Ryobi in fall 2002. I was almost always completely alone for at least 5 to 6 hours a night in a 500,000 square foot building, completely alone. These were the circumstances that formed my fascination with using technology and enjoying using technology for God's glory. At the beginning of 2003, 1 year into college, I used my new college discount to buy an education bundle that included a laptop, Apple PowerBook G4, 867 megahertz, 12-inch, if you're familiar with that, and something in a new category of devices called an MP3 player, an iPod. 10 gig, third generation iPod, if you're curious. In the slow and dead hours of third shift, I used my time to learn an entirely new operating system, OS 10, and work on college assignments. A lot of dead time there on that third shift job. In the calmness of the midnight hours, I would listen to sermons on my iPod as I walked outside around the Ryobi property. At the beginning of 2004, some people in church donated some money, about 50% of the cost, so that I could start a 15-minute weekly program at our local AM radio station. In hindsight, it probably wasn't the wisest thing to do, to give a new Christian attending a very strict fundamentalist college a voice to say whatever was on his mind with very little learning across the airwaves every Friday right in the middle of rush hour traffic, every Friday at 5 p.m. It wasn't much, but it was what I had, and I wanted to give it to God. I read in a technology magazine about a new way people could download MP3 files on demand using RSS feeds called podcast. The radio programs that I made for the local station were already in MP3 format when I recorded them, so I only really had one, and I was already uploading them to a website, preachertony.com, so it was kind of just adding one more step. So I used a template in this technology magazine, and I taught myself the bare basics, the very bare basics, I still don't know how to code anything, of writing an RSS file and creating a podcast in 2005. Hard to believe podcasts have been around almost as long as someone could be born and now be a legal adult, but it's been around that long almost. I was fascinated, absolutely filled with childlike wonder. So at the beginning of 2005, alone at work in the middle of the night, I could listen to sermons from a pastor in Florida while walking under the stars of third shift. I could read the Bible and search for words in MacSword, the Apple equivalent of eSword. With a microphone and a program from Felt Tip called Sound Studio, longtime Mac users may remember that program, this little kid on night shift could talk about the Bible. And with an RSS file with an MP3 attachments, people beyond the local AM radio signal, WRX AM 1020, upstate South Carolina, they could listen if they wanted to. The family in Indiana who blessed me and my wife with a gift when we got married. The mother who recently miscarried in Wisconsin. The mother raising 3 children in West Virginia. The man in Oregon who donated web server space. And a pastor in Fresno. These people who sent me emails and gifts and encouragement, maybe the podcast format was so new that the options were pretty limited. Bible, podcast, 2005, probably not a whole lot popping up back then. There was some, but not a whole lot. Maybe that's why they listened to me. There was not many other options. But like the lad with the fish and the loaves, I gave to Jesus what I had, a love for him and a desire to use technology for him, and amazingly, he blessed it. It was my feeble attempt to get in on what seemed to be a revolution in how digital media was being delivered and consumed. Personally, life was simple, technology was changing, the spare room in our 2-bedroom apartment was my computer room, and though I had little knowledge of the Bible and little knowledge of how computers actually work, God was blessing it. Eventually, the local radio station closed, the podcast stopped, the Bible broadcast on radio, Bible podcast online. Life got busy personally, and the handful of people who subscribed no longer heard me for 15 minutes a week. The USB mic I bought for the radio program has been idly stashed in my desk, right here, for nearly a decade now. I obviously didn't change the world. By any means, I didn't. But a new love for Jesus and an interest in technologies for the new millennium changed me. Without even realizing it, I think it was Jesus Christ teaching me that I can find his fingerprints everywhere, even in operating systems, beautifully designed electronics, RSS and XML files, website design software, MP3 sermons, and an email archive folder that I still have in my mail app to keep correspondence with people who told me, Tony, thank you, keep it up, keep going. Spiritually and technologically, that was the most sentimental time of my life. This paper, written as an assignment in biblical theology, will surely not start any academic flames. But perhaps, God can use it to rekindle the spark of wonder that I had years ago, that He really does care about how we might live all parts of our lives for His glory. For those who think this paper may be too technological and not enough Bible, I'll blame that on my lack of biblical knowledge. I can't even read the Greek or Hebrew behind our beautifully typeset English Bibles. For those who think this paper may be too biblical and not enough bits or bytes, I'll blame that on my lack of technological knowledge. I have no understanding of the code behind our beautiful graphical user interfaces. And if anyone wonders why someone with a little understanding of the Bible and little understanding of technology wants to write something about how the both of them come together, that is because I never want to lose my childlike sense of wonder as I wander through this world, marveling at all the ways the Creator has interwoven doctrine and data, theology and technology in such beautiful, biblical, and innovative ways. That's how I opened my paper for this class, that I did for this class. If that seems to be of interest to anyone and you would like to hear me keep going, if you'll leave a comment below or send me a message, I sure would appreciate it. If I get any response at all, I'll take that as a sign that maybe someone out there somewhere has an interest in these two things like as I do. How does something that we love, the Bible, correspond with something that we love to use, technology? How can we not be so strict that we push this aside and say, well, no, the Bible doesn't talk about it? No. How can we take these beautiful, amazing, powerful things that God has given people the wisdom to create and use them for His honor and for His glory? Without even realizing it, this is something that I've had in the back of my mind for 2 decades now. And only recently, thanks to Dr. Chrysler, have I been given the opportunity to take it and put it to pen and paper. And this was the final result. So I look forward to hearing any comments from anyone, and look forward to recording the next video where we look in the next section at the introduction to the paper itself that opens with these words: "This is a day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years. Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything." And Apple has been very fortunate to introduce a few of those things into the world. That was an opening comment from Steve Jobs on January 9th, 2007. And I opened my next section of the paper with those words to ask the question, where is God and all of that? So I look forward to seeing you next time here on almost said the Bible broadcast. Look forward to seeing you next time here on the YouTube channel for Tony Walker. Take care.